Welcome everybody to today's medical device marketing podcast. So today we're talking about the materials that you need or that you should have before a product launch or a company launch, a brand launch, anything like that really. I'm joined here today with Hannah, one of our account managers here at Podymos. So this is something we do on a regular basis. So we thought today we'd just have more of a chat around it, but we're going to go through all the different types of materials you need. And we're going to look at digital and we're going to look at traditional as well. But I think it's worth, me and Hannah have just been speaking before this, I think it's worth talking about, to start off with, what needs to be done before we get to this stage, because it's not, if you just get to this stage and create your materials, you're going to potentially bump into some problems. So Hannah, what were we saying earlier about what needs to be done beforehand?
So we're talking about a number of different things, and it's all the way sort of from branding and messaging, as this is a medical device, that intended purpose and, clinical development plans, and actually having everything set in motion from an R&D perspective and the why, bringing it forward so that any claims that you make on your marketing material or any of your product launch, everything's already set in stone. It's got the claims you've referenced, you've worked out when you're going to get your clinical evidence to support it. Everything is in place beforehand, because otherwise, and I think we've all seen it done, you get a product and you go to launch it and you go, okay, what can I say? What can't I say? Who's using it? What's the evidence to support it? And we also talked about branding and messaging. So where does this product sit within the portfolio? Or if it's a sort of standalone product, where does it sit within the parent company? There's nothing worse than seeing a product that's kind of got an incongruence or with those surrounding it. And that's quite, you distrust that. Or that's what I feel from a brand perspective, that you see something, you go, oh, that's interesting. And you go, but I don't trust it because it's completely new and there's nothing evidencing. And I think the affinity that we have with brands, as they've gone along, they're there to make our lives better. We buy one product or service over another for nothing really sometimes, other than how it makes us feel. And that's really important with all of your material, that it sits and fits in with who the parent company, who the company is as a person. Because that's how I think we see brands, as a person. They make someone feel something, which I think is a different dimension of looking at it. And it's a whole subject of a different podcast. But really important to note that, all of those bits need to be sorted first before you then start thinking about your product launch. And when you do those things properly, your product launch becomes very enjoyable, because things fit together nicely rather than constantly like butting heads against, like, oh, we haven't got that. So yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier.
That was what we were talking about earlier. Yeah, it's sort of having the rolling the brand equity through in a way, isn't it? So it's making sure that, it's a very good point, that it's capitalized and that when your customer sees your new product, it's instantly recognizable as yours, and it has all those lovely brand values that they've known to grow and love throughout.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Excellent. So that's all sort of done before you ever get to the plan of how am I actually going to launch this into the market. So you know what clinical claims you can say and you can't say, and what so the next thing we really see is, right, what does success look like? So it's defining what we think success is going to be within the market. So how would you describe sort of metrics that we would look at and how we'd set these up and things like that?
I think it really depends on what it is that you want to achieve. And it depends on, we're working in medical device. We work with, consumable, quick products that, get used, they're single use, all the way through to long-term capital purchases. And the sales cycle between those are going to be vastly different. So therefore the metrics that you use, will vary and are tailored to what you're doing. I think that everything we talk about is, using KPIs, those key performance indicators that actually tell you that what you're doing is effective, because otherwise how do you know that the piece of material that you have created, the campaign that you're running, actually has an effect, and that you should do more of it or indeed less of it if it's not effective. So if we're looking at kind of quicker wins, it could be on revenue. Revenue is the core value or the core driver of a business. Without revenue and profitability, it would cease to exist. But there's other things. If we're looking at product launches, it's impressions on social media. It's leads generated. It's conversations with sales teams. It's so many things. All of it fits together, and it's about how do you see this going, and setting your objectives early on, because if it's a consumable product that you want to see exponential growth in a year, you need to define that. And actually success is meeting or exceeding your goals, whatever they are.
Yeah, and that's really interesting actually, because if you don't set KPIs, and I think probably everybody is guilty of it at some point, that you don't set KPIs and you just say, well, we'll do this and, number of leads or revenue or something like that, but they're not really KPIs that you can track along the way. If you don't set them, you actually might not set the right strategy in order to achieve what you want either, because by setting yourself extremely big goals, you then say, actually, in order to hit this, I'm really going to have to do something different in my marketing.
Yes.
And so it then drives that activity as well. So I think setting KPIs is critical so that you know how you're going to meet. And as you say, it's about meeting and exceeding those KPIs. So not only is it tracking them as you go, it's actually saying, how is this going to change my strategy to make sure that I do hit them?
And how, from your experience, how kind of long should these KPIs be? Are they kind of short and measured, or are they longer term, or from your experience?
KPIs last forever. In my mind, they should do, because, and it's before. So as soon as you start activities, that's when KPIs should come in my mind. So if you have a product and, it's going to launch in 6 months' time and you want to do a build up, you need to have KPIs, monthly KPIs, or even bi-weekly KPIs measuring what's happening, because by doing that, you can then adjust your strategy and your activity to make sure you meet those KPIs. But I don't think you should ever get to the stage where you say we don't need KPIs anymore, because it's almost like saying, we want to get here. It's like a mission and a vision, really, within a company. You can say our vision is to get here, but actually we have no idea how we're going to get there. And it's the same things with KPIs. If you say we just need to get here, but we have no idea how we're going to get there, it's like you need the KPIs to set the tactics, and the tactics will meet your KPIs. They sort of sit together. So I think KPIs are critical all the time. But when it comes to a product launch, it's really KPIs before the product launch. And that doesn't necessarily need to be in marketing. I mean, our side is marketing. So we would look at it at buzz before a product launch. And that would be things like social media, etc. And of course, that depends on if you've got a CE mark and things like that. So if you can actually do it. But then afterwards, it can be weekly KPIs. That would be really short. But it can be monthly, things like that. And then maybe you extend them out slightly as you get further away from launch. But I think, look at us at Podymos. We have KPIs, quarterly KPIs, and we always have it. And it's amazing how much you grow and change by always having KPIs and metrics.
Yes.
So I think it's the same for any launch. We have to set those KPIs and those metrics to make sure we can exceed them.
Yeah. And I think it's about that awareness, isn't it? And that's, part of the plan of like, where do you want to go to? How are you going to get there? And that regular feedback, to tailoring, because, just because you want to go somewhere, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean it's going to happen. You need, the data, like that data-driven decision making. I mean, it's that's a buzz phrase from, but
it's so true. But it's so true.
And
I think the other thing is, it's like the 10x thing. It's like, if you don't have metrics and you go, it's okay, so we're just going to do this and we're going to get to where we want to get. But actually, you're not going to get anywhere near where you want to get, but you're not going to see that if you don't have metrics. And it's that there's the book by Grant Cardone that says 10x. It's called 10x. And he basically says anything that you think is going to take 1x to do, it's actually going to take 10x to do. But if you don't have any metrics, you're not going to see that. So, yeah, it is making sure that you keep on track.
Okay, so we've set our metrics. what now? So that's kind of like setting the goals for success, and
Yeah.
actually working out what you want to do. What do you think next? Like, where do we go
So
next with that?
we've spoken a little bit. So if we go to what we do, we've spoken a little bit about this beforehand, but it's really the brand and message. And the reason we always talk about this to start off with, in message first and then brand. In fact, message sits within brand, but it depends how you define it. But really, messaging is the number one thing, because if you don't have powerful messaging, you can then create all the materials you want, but the effectiveness of them will immediately be dulled down
Mm-hmm.
or non-existent if you don't have good messaging. So I think the first thing before you even think of creating any of your materials is making sure that you have that brand message and brand style
Yeah,
in place. There's many reasons for that. Of course, you want things to resonate really quickly with your audience. You want them to be relevant. But from a brand identity perspective, exactly what you were saying, Hannah, you've got to make sure that when your audience see your new materials or see your new product, it instantly relates to the company that it's
mm-hmm.
come from or your company. So I think the messaging and the branding are hugely important to start off with, from a consistency perspective, from an impact perspective. So that's the first thing we always do before
Yeah,
we ever go into any materials. And we always ask our clients for that as well before we go into any materials, because otherwise it will not be as effective
yeah,
and you potentially will be wasting your money. And that's
yeah.
not what we want anybody to do.
It's an efficiency perspective as well. Actually,
Mm,
if you've got all of it set up, the materials created will all have that consistent message, that brand, that feel,
mm,
naturally, rather than having to explore various different options, because
mm.
they need to resonate with who you are as a brand, a company.
Yeah,
And I think it just speeds it up, doesn't it? It makes the creative process more creative, because you go, right, that's our color palette, that's our messaging. Now, how do we really impactfully, create the
yeah,
campaign to resonate with the maybe new audience? It could be the same audience, but if you're going into a new therapeutic area, in a hospital setting, people are used to different colors for different companies, so there's an instant recognition of it. So I guess it's just defining all of that stuff up front,
up front.
so that we can then run with it, or you can run with
And once you defined it, write it down.
it.
But I mean, I say that in a funny way, but like write it down, put it in anything that you've defined, write down, keep it in one place where everybody has access to and easy access to it. We use at Podymos brand pad that works really, really well. That's a good thing. And then you can send it everywhere, which means then everybody is always talking about the same thing.
Yes. Yeah, and
Mm.
I think it's, especially within medical devices, like that intended purpose and things like that is so key to get correct and
Yes.
consistent
And
throughout.
your
So
clinical references,
yes,
all these things. So it can all be in one place. We use the Terra to keep all our clinical references in one place. But yeah, like decide where you're going to keep everything, keep it there, and then share it with everybody who needs to know it, and then you'll get consistency. And then you can start doing the fun stuff, which is like creating all the really good materials, which was the whole point of the podcast to start off with. So we've
yeah,
just managed to get quite a way in without even talking about
yeah.
materials.
So we'll start the podcast now, shall we?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, so where do we start with the materials? So there's lots of different options, all the way from traditional to digital marketing. And I guess we've talked a lot through Podymos, through the podcast, about this funnel and how everything kind of meets together and is interwoven, really, to convert customers or potential customers into customers through,
Mm.
lots of different channels. So I guess we're talking again about multi-channel marketing, and with a product launch, do you start with the website, do you start with social media, do you start with sales leave pieces? There's a lot to choose from. What would you say?
I could throw that right back at you, but I'll answer. But I think I think it's webs. Well, I mean, there's lots of different things, but as you're saying, multi-channel marketing, everything has to go somewhere. And I think, well, not, I think, everything needs to go somewhere, and the ideal place or the optimal place for everybody to go is to your website. Why is that? Because you can have great amount of information on your website that answers all the questions that your audience are asking, so that they can become more qualified, and they can qualify themselves, because we know everybody's, investigating everything online before they ever speak to a company. So that if you can send everybody to your website, and it's really well constructed, and it shows them what the next steps are, and what to do, and where all the answers are and things like that, then that's a great place to start. But that on its own will not be good enough, because that's really the hub where you push everybody down to, and then people move through their buyer's journey, get in contact to book an evaluation or find out more information or something like that. But it is the hub of everything to do with you, because you can format it exactly as you like. It never sleeps. It's always there. It has amazing content on it, so it has to start with the website. Otherwise, you do all these amazing social media, and people can convert through social media. That's true. But otherwise, you do all this social media, and where's it going? Into a website that isn't optimized for conversion. So you're technically pushing them into a brick wall.
Yes.
Metaphorically. So I think, that's why the website is so important when it comes to multi-channel marketing and a product launch.
Yeah.
And that can be done through things like landing pages. So a landing page is not your homepage. It's a page on your website that's designed specifically for an audience to be sent to provide them the information they need to then move through their journey at whatever stage they might be. So you might have 3 or 4 landing pages. We don't tend to see that in medical device. For a product launch, you tend to have one page, maybe some back pages to it. But yes, that would be sort of the page you'd send people to.
And I guess, on the kind of the website, that landing page, although someone might end up there, people tend to come and go. People don't tend to go onto a website and make that decision straight away. So again, it's about like healthy websites and being able to navigate through really easily, because when you land on a web page, the first thing you do is you get the information, and if it doesn't satisfy, you move off very quickly. And if it does, then you start exploring. You're intrigued about the company, so you might actually want to go to the About Us page, because if it's a company that you don't know so well, you might want to know what else do you do, or if it's a company that you do know well, through big companies or good relationships. You may actually want to look at case studies or whatever it is. But again, it's not just the landing page, is it? It's kind of the whole holistic website experience, and things being easy. And calls to action is always something that comes up. And if someone doesn't know what to do when they land on that web page, it's easy to move off. That back button is up there in the top left, whereas actually consistent call to actions throughout the whole page, written in the same wording, looking the same, it really directs. You start at the top and you go, oh, I'm just looking for information, and by the time you get 3 calls to action and you've read the page, you're actually going to leave your contact details because you want to book an evaluation,
or potentially even have another call to action that does leave your email address or something like that. Yeah. It's interesting, your point that you say, because we talk about this a lot as well, and I think it's a really good thing to say more about, is the calls to action that are all the same and repeated an awful lot down the page. Why do we do that?
For consistency, and it's telling the audience what they need to do, and that they really, really do need to do it. I think we all like to be directed. We like simplicity. We're quite lazy nowadays when we look for information. We want it to become apparent very quickly. So actually, a strong and repetitive call to action, you recognise it, you know what to do with it, and it doesn't require too much thought. So I think, from personal experience looking through websites, I signed up to one the other day, and I hadn't even meant to, I had not gone to that website to sign on to that newsletter, and now it's in my inbox, and I've read it because it's interesting, and I didn't know it was going to be interesting until I got to the bottom, and the content was good, but I had a clear message. Otherwise, I'd have got to the bottom of that content and thought, oh, that was interesting, and I would have done nothing further with it. So I think
I think that's the really interesting point, because it's people are ready to convert. Not everybody is ready to convert at the same point. So actually, I think as a nation, we're probably not very good at asking for things. Like, I think we're like, no, well, the button's up at the top, that's fine. But actually, everybody's ready to convert at different points. So if you get to the bottom of something and actually there's no call to action there, it's just not forefront in your mind. So you don't get back up to the top of the page to then convert. So I think, that's a really interesting point you bring up about you got to the bottom of the page. And actually, if it wasn't there, you probably wouldn't have signed up, because that was the point at which you were ready to convert. And I think in websites, in launch websites, that's also really important, because you also said earlier that people come to the site, but they might then leave. So if you can, if they're not going to get in contact at the first point, then is there something else you can provide them that's interesting for them to download, and they'll leave their email address as a result of that. Because if they do that, you now know that person on your website is potentially interested in your product, and you can then send them more emails directly to their inbox because they provided with your email address. So it gives you another route to start speaking to them. You could also do things like paid ads by retargeting and things like that. We tend not to do so much of paid ads, but that is an option if you want to do that through retargeting. Actually, for a product launch, that could be a good idea as well, just from a repetition and reminding people about your product.
And I think it's something that it's a statistic that you've given in the past, but actually someone has to interact with your material, recognize your message 15 to 25 times. So actually coming onto the website once may well not be enough, but an email 2 days later, it jogs the memory, a newsletter, or somebody seeing them on social media through paid ads, whatever it is, but it's that repetition, it's in that mind, and you go, oh, I recognize that. And you may not even have remembered that you've been onto that site 3 days ago, but in your subconsciously there is a recognition. So again, it's that building that trust and that credibility of, I've seen that before and I recognize that's safe to me, I know that.
And it's also about when they're ready, going back to when they're ready to convert, isn't it? Because, it really, people convert when they have when you solve the problem they have.
Yes.
So when they initially read your website, they might not feel they really have that problem. But actually 5 weeks down the line, they may experience that problem. But if they haven't then seen you for the last 5 weeks, they could have forgotten who you were, what the product was, something like that. But if you're continually just prompting them through social media, through email, things like that, as soon as they bump into that problem, they'll be like, yes, that's what I need. And of course, then that's the point they convert. So I think I was chatting to somebody this morning actually about this, and this is to do with product launches, but it's also just in general about marketing. I think often people do marketing campaigns that are quite short in timeline. And what that doesn't take into consideration is when you do that, you're only considering the people who are ready to convert at that one point in time. Whereas actually people are ready to convert at all points in time. So you need to continue doing your marketing in order to catch them at all points of that journey. And, so really it should be continuous. It's sort of what I'm saying for that. And that goes to a degree to the product launch in the sense of, it needs to be an ongoing activity across multiple channels.
And I guess that, the social media aspect plays such a key part of this, of driving traffic. We're a global population that spend our time online nowadays. And, before, in days gone by, people didn't research medical device online. It was sales representative coming into the OR, into the clinic or whatever it is, and it's changed completely the way that people are buying now. So having that sort of product launch across various channels, social media really kind of bringing in the right audience on the right platform. So if it's
that's it as well, the right platform, isn't it? Because we've got so many platforms now. So are you targeting patients? Are you targeting healthcare professionals? What are you saying? Yeah, totally. Depends on what platform you're going to be on as well. And the type of content. One thing we haven't spoken about here actually is we're talking about all about sending the message out and the branding, but actually what content are you sending out? So that's a big thing that we see at the moment. Are you putting it in animation? Are you putting it in video? Video, we know video and animation digest 60,000 times faster than text. So how are you using lots of different types of media as well during your product launch within your materials to support what you're doing?
Yeah, and I think video and animation, there's a debate between which is appropriate for when. And again, it depends on what you're doing. But medical devices can be complex. So sometimes, reading about them, you don't get the full sense of it. Whereas actually being shown the device can be really, really impactful, because you go, oh, I get that now. And it's that the way that we digest it is different. We see something and we see how it works rather than an image on a web page. So I think it's that mix of medias, and it, people learn differently, and it's looking at all of those different ways people digest content, and it's about adding value. If they see a piece of your content, whether it be video through social media or whether it's your website, it has to add value. They have to learn something and feel that it was worth their time, that it's satisfied their problem. It's whether that problem is I want to know more about it. That could be the problem. It could be an intrigue that it satisfies, or it could be I've got a particular problem with my patients. How does it satisfy that, or whatever it is? But it's that solution that it does, rather than just features. Because I think really easily is it to go down like it does this, it does that.
Well,
Actually, but
that's an
why?
interesting point, isn't it? Because that's really about answering your customers' questions.
Yeah,
So when has anybody said, what are the features of your device? They might do. That could be a question.
yeah,
But mostly it says, what does this device deliver to me?
yeah.
So mostly it's the benefits that it's after. So I think that's a really important point. But it is thinking about how people are actually asking the question, what are they asking you? Because that's what really all your content should be talking about. Because that's why they're not buying from you. They're not buying from you, or they're not adopting your product because they have issues or concerns about that adoption. So really you need to answer all the questions and concerns they have in order to then move them through their buyer's journey.
Yeah, and again,
Yeah.
it goes back down to where people are in that buyer's journey, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And what information that particular person needs within it. They could all be HCPs, but they're various ways along there, and their needs are different.
And they've got different questions,
Yeah,
and but they tend to be the same. They tend to be different, but they tend to be grouped. So actually, another important point is it's very important to keep like updating the sort of content you're sending out as well, because you'll find it will, the questions the audience are asking change over time, especially as a product goes into the market,
yeah,
which is interesting. About what you need from a traditional side as well, because one thing about digital, it's great, it never sleeps. Everybody is vetting us digitally, that's very true, but digital feeds the sales team. So it does not replace the sales team, it feeds the sales team and it supports the sales team, especially when it comes to answering questions, things like that, so that people who are looking to try the product can actually qualify themselves before they even speak to the sales team. So then reduce the sales cycles and things like that. So what materials do the sales team need during a product launch to be effective and support them moving forwards?
Again, I think it's looking at what you're doing with it, who are you interacting with, and therefore what your needs. So are you speaking to patients, and therefore you'll need potentially like patient friendly leave pieces that leave behind in clinics, or it could be that you're presenting at big meetings in hospitals to procurement level, in which case they're different things. One will be a sales aid with a lot more information because this is expected, whereas patients may be a leave piece. They're not going to want a big presentation. So
Can you just define the difference between a sales aid and a leave piece?
yes, of course. So a sales aid, I would say, is more of a traditional PowerPoint. So you are presenting kind of the what, the why, the how. You're adding value, but it's generally a bigger piece of information, consistent with your branding and your messaging. Whereas a leave piece is a shorter document. It may be 2 sides of A4. It could be an A5 leave piece, but it's easily digestible. It's something that doesn't go into huge detail, but kind of gives that user or that patient or that HCP or whoever it is the overview of your brand in a story, consistently. So it may be done through infographics, and easily digestible kind of information that someone picks it up and you go, I want to know more. And at the bottom, there's a nice call to action of go to the website, or, whatever
I was
it
going to
is.
say, where do these all go back to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I would define the two. I don't know if you have anything to add on that one.
No, I think that's true. I think PowerPoints can be extremely more interactive these days. So I think that's true. But it is really telling the story in a really concise way so that everybody is saying the same thing. And actually a really powerful way of delivering sales aids from a PowerPoint perspective is actually having in the notes everything that you want somebody to say. I know the best ones I've seen definitely have that. And then you find you get a very consistent message out in the market, which is great. But I think I love your point about where does it next go? Back to the website.
Yeah.
And it's true. Everything in any way should always go back to the website, just because it allows people to digest information. I think I heard somebody say recently that they don't feel people actually read much anymore. And I couldn't disagree with that more, because you know, I think everybody digests information differently, but, you know, we see on websites, people read an awful lot of pages. So if you've got information that's really relevant, I think they do read that information. So by using a sales aid and then saying, want to find more about the clinical data, find out more about this device works, find more about that. If they're truly interested, they can go and find all this information themselves on your website. So I think it is really powerful to say, you know, everyone has to go back to the website. It's
Yeah.
very powerful to do that.
Yeah, and I think for for kind of traditional materials, they're static. They're not in the same way.
Mm,
A website you can update, you can be continuous with. It's great to have static material that you leave in the field or you present and things like that. But it's also, if it's got a clear route to where it goes, back to that website,
mm,
that can be very, very up to date, and it's good to be up to date.
mm.
People are coming backwards and forwards, and we like to see things updated and evolve, and we like to see that kind of story evolve on there. So I think they work really nicely together. If you've got budget and time to do both, I think they work well together
Yeah,
rather than as an independent, because you know a question or a statement a lot of salespeople say is, "Oh, marketing are trying to replace sales teams," and actually that's just not true. I think it's that mix, that hybrid of marketing is all about driving
yeah,
lead generation, speeding up sales cycles. So actually, the salesperson can work with leads that are qualified, that are going to convert quicker, that gives them more time to do more. So it's a partnership, and I think that
exactly.
materials should be exactly the same
Yeah.
in that respect.
No, it's true. And I mean, I think we see from everything that's happening in marketing at the moment, the really successful companies moving forward are going to be the ones that really have a hybrid sales and marketing team together that really work well together. Because marketing is on the front line with the customer. They know so much. Sorry, sales are at the front line with the customer. They know so much. And marketing, need that information to be able to create the amazing materials they do. So the two together are a hugely powerful combination. So the only thing left we have to talk about, I think, although we might have missed stuff, is exhibition presence,
Yeah.
because that's the other area that the sales team. So we've got now the PowerPoint presentation, the leave pieces for when you go and see doctors within the hospitals, clinics, etc., etc. But then also exhibition presence. So things that we'll need in that. What sort of things will we need in that, Hannah?
So again, it depends. It's always the answer, isn't it? But consistency. So this is where all of the work that you
Yeah.
do up front about your branding, your messages, your key claims, your intended purpose, your presence at an exhibition, you don't want to just throw the kitchen sink at it. I think it's really tempting.
Mm.
We've all been to exhibitions where you want to bring this product and that, and nothing works together particularly. And it's not a bad thing to have, lots of things, but if they work together with a clear aim. So why are you at that conference? It goes back to KPIs.
Who's your audience? What do you want them
Exactly.
to?
And
Yeah,
what do
what
you
do you
want?
want them to know from you?
And what do you
Yeah.
want them to do next? Because it's all well and good
Mm.
being there, and you go and you go, right, I need to go and get some leads. Okay, fine, but how are we going to get them? What's our messaging? What's our, what do we want our customer or potential customer to know about us, and therefore do next? Because
Mm.
otherwise, it's that brick wall, isn't it? Like, where do they go? So you've had a nice conversation, but actually, where do you drive them? Well, actually, you drive them to speak to the sales team, you drive them to the website. You bring them back through this funnel. So I think simplicity at a conference and really like understandable, kind of digestible information. Often it's like conference booths, you could have big back walls,
Mm.
or you could have just smaller pop-up socks, and it depends on the conference, the budget, the audience, everything like that. But again, it needs to be easy. You're working with clinicians that are walking through this hall, and they've got so much information. It can be a bit like walking through a supermarket with loads of brands. It
Yeah.
needs to be easily recognizable.
Yeah. And actually, a lot of doctors don't want to come up to your stand,
Mm,
for whatever reason, because whatever reason. So actually, one thing that we've done in the past is have big QR codes on
yeah,
stands that actually you can scan from quite a way away. And that's actually quite a good way of getting people to be able to digest the
yeah,
information on their own. Because again, we know that's a trend that's coming. I know I've spoken about this before on podcasts, but I think there was a study by someone called Garner, who found that 2.2% more 44% of millennials don't want a salesperson involved in a
Mm.
purchase at all. They'd be more comfortable without. And that's 2.2 times more than the generation before. So there has to be this trend. You feel there's this trend coming through where actually people want to make their own decisions, and they're doing this online. So at congresses as well, they might think, and I know I've been at congresses, and we go to marketing congresses, and we see like people on the stand waiting to attack us. And we're like, no, but we want to find out the information.
Yeah.
So, actually being able to quickly find out the information either from their website or from a QR code that sends you, to the right bit can be hugely useful. So it's thinking about, the different types of people you have coming up to your exhibition stand as well. And I know you want to engage with them, but maybe now isn't the time they want to engage with you. And maybe they want to find out a little bit more before they're ready to engage with you. Although a lot of people are ready, but not everybody.
And I think also, conferences, generally these clinicians are in, a full day of lectures, they're learning a lot of information, and they may only get a 15-minute break. And it's about taking that step back sometimes and going, am I the most important person in their room at the moment? And sometimes being sympathetic and a bit more subtle through the use of, QR codes and accessible information. You're still having a presence. Yeah. But if you bombard them with pop-up socks with a million products all over it, they have no idea. They don't even know where to begin with that. Whereas really clear, consistent, understandable, that you read as you walk past, actually, they may go, right, I know that they were there. I've heard about that product. I'll go and do some research on my own time. But at the moment, I need to go and get a coffee and just absorb the information I've taken. And I know that it can be hugely frustrating at a conference when that happens. But it's about making them, everything really clear and simple and easy rather than that attack approach. Because I know we've all been there.
Yeah, no, totally, totally.
You can see it now.
Excellent. Good. Okay, so I think that's pretty much gone through everything. So I think the key takeaways from what we've said is that when you're launching a product, obviously the first thing is your intended purpose has to be right for that product, because you have to be able to make the right claims that differentiate you in the market. But then it's about having a really strong and simple message that goes out, so that people understand the problem you solve for them, and what's in it for them. Consistent branding that's sympathetic to your company and your other products. And then really a multi-channel approach. So making sure that you're going down your digital channels, because people have to see you on a regular basis before they can actually either experience the problem you solve and then get in contact with you, or even, recognize that this is what you're doing, just because people see so many things every day. But content is king at the moment, and it's going to be king in the future. So it's about really having a website that provides all the information that your audience needs so they can make a decision, and then pushing all your materials to that. And that can be exhibitions, Salesforce exhibitions, all things like that, all your social media, all your digital channels, all going into your website, and then optimizing that so that you get conversions, you get email addresses, leads, things like that, which then support your sales team.
Brilliant.
Have I missed anything with that? Do you think that's an accurate summary?
I think that's an accurate summary. I mean, there is just one bit to add, and it's not something we've necessarily talked about, and I don't know if it's necessarily marketing, but that training of the sales team of that consistent message brand, because they are the coalface, they are the company's ambassadors, and I think that's a vital step in all of this, that it's that cohesive thing of at all points people know what they're doing, and the same point is true of the sales team. So your customers know where they're going and what they're doing, but actually that the sales team are informed that this is the plan, this is what this is how we're going to do it, these are our objectives, so that it's actually everyone working towards the same goals for the same rather than individual silos, which can happen. That's just something that struck me then, that you could do all of this great work.
No, it's true.
You need to relay that message and your goals.
It's actually thinking about what's going to go wrong in my product launch and how can I stop that happening. And that's one of the classic things that could go wrong if you do all this amazing stuff and then you don't tell the right people about it. And this may be really obvious stuff to everybody who's listening, but it is worth thinking about it, isn't it, to make sure that what is going to go wrong and how do I stop that happening up front, because that's then when you see really great success. Excellent. Good. So thank you everyone for listening today. We hope it's been helpful. We have also written an article on all the materials that you need for a medical device product launch. Visit our Learning Hub on our website. Everything will be there. We've also got loads of great information on there about everything to do with medical device marketing that we do. So everything to do with downstream marketing, branding, and messaging. If you have any questions that we haven't answered on the website, or you just want us to write some other articles on things that are interesting to you, please let us know. Get in contact via LinkedIn, or get in contact via our website, and we'd be more than happy to help. Hannah, thank you very much for your time today, and I hope everybody has a fantastic day.